So it's been a few weeks since I posted a video for a few reasons. One being that I've just been busy, but the other is that I knew that the X-Summit was today and that Fujifilm was going to make at least one big announcement, that being the X-H2. So I figured I'd wait until the X-Summit was done to let some of that hype building up to it die down just a little bit, and to see what they actually announced before I talked about it. So this video is a little bit of my take on what was announced today and kind of what we have to look forward to for the rest of the year. So for the past few weeks, there have been some leaked images of the X-H2. Well, now we know it was the X-H2s on FujiRumors.com, and a lot of YouTubers made videos based on those images. A lot of the reactions were mixed, some were negative, but regardless, I didn't want to jump into that mix of reacting based on rumors or leaked images. I wanted to wait until today. So yeah, today is May 31st, 2022. Fuji had their first X-Summit announcement of the year. Normally they have it around February, I think, or usually they have one earlier in the year. I think with a lot of things going on in the world, things are different right now, so they had this one in May. But some of the reactions based on those leak images were pretty drastic, like Fujifilm has lost its soul and it's going to miss the mark again on this one. And some of the reactions were warranted and some were just overreacting, I think. I think if you look back to the past 5 years of Fuji announcements and announcements from other companies, I think a lot of what was announced and a lot of what's to come is relatively predictable. I don't think there's a lot of avenues for huge surprises. There are a couple of things that Fujifilm could do down the road to surprise some people, and we'll get to those, I think, in another video. But what I want to do first is let's review what I predicted, or what I had hoped for, actually. I shouldn't say I predicted. Let's review what I had hoped for this camera. Now, about a year and a half ago, I made a video on what I hoped the X-H2 would be, and I gave basically 3 different options. And to make a long story short, the 3 options were, one was really just enhancing all the photo features for sports photography and wildlife and making those professionals happy. And the other was enhancing all the video-centric features for the cinematographers and the filmmakers and the content creators and making that group of creators happy. The third option that I hoped for was to mimic what Leica did. And that was to have one high-resolution sensor-based model for photography-based, and one that was more video-centric that had a slightly lower resolution but had all the bells and whistles that you'd expect from a hybrid video mirrorless camera. And I might play some of those clips of what I said to see kind of what I got right and what I got wrong. And that would mean releasing 2 X-H2 models. Let's say an X-H2A and an X-H2s, or whatever moniker they would like to label them with. The A being the photography model at 40 megapixels or so. We didn't know at the time what it was going to be. And then I said the X-H2s would be the video-centric one with 26 megapixels, flip-out screen, more codec choices, external RAW, and internal ProRes. And that was the gist of what I had hoped for. Those 2 models split in that direction, 40 megapixels and 26 megapixels, the 26 megapixel one being the video-centric one. To me, this seemed relatively obvious because of what Leica did, also because of what Panasonic did and what Canon was trying to do. It was a model that the industry was, it was a direction the industry was heading, was this kind of thing. And I thought Fujifilm had the opportunity to do the same thing. So to me, it felt relatively obvious, and Leica was like the last indicator that really sold me on this possibility. So overall, I got the big ideas right with the thought process behind those 2 models, but I didn't dig too deep in the details to try to predict a lot of those specifics. But the big things I got right. I mean, obviously I expected the all these other specs on the spec sheet to get better, faster, increased of everything in that regard. But I didn't spend too much time predicting specific numbers on below those basic things I said already. Obviously, the big things, like I said, I was right on, that we are going to get 2 models. Today they announced the X-H2s in detail, even giving us price and relative release time frame. Someone mentioned the date, but I didn't see the date. But they said July. I'm sorry, this is July. I think Paltatech said July 7th. He may be correct. Not sure where he got that one from, but so let's say July 7th. It's going to be $24.99, and we have all the specs for it. At the end of the presentation, they teased the X-H2 without the S moniker on it, being the version with the 40 megapixel sensor. But they didn't say too much about that camera beyond that, so we know very little about that version of the X-H2. But the big key points about the X-H2s are, the revised body design. So there's no more shutter speed and ISO dials. I think the screen is slightly bigger and moved over. And instead of where the ISO dial is on the X-H1 here, there's a PSAM dial, as we've seen on some of their medium format cameras, as well as other manufacturers have that dial as well. The buttons have been redesigned. The shape and size of some of the buttons. The joystick on the back had a huge redesign. It's much, much larger and placed higher up on the body. The screen is a flip-out screen now, very similar to the X-T4. There is a CF Express card instead of 2 UHS-2 SD card slots. That's to handle the ProRes codecs and those kinds of high-speed needs, is to fulfill that. It has a full-size HDMI on this side, along with headphone and an 1/8-inch microphone input. It shoots 15 frames a second mechanical shutter and 40 frames a second with the electronic shutter. That's the burst rate. I think it can sustain 30 frames a second for much longer, but the 40 frames a second is actually shooting raw, so that's pretty impressive. The other key points are improved autofocus. Specifically, it has better eye detect. It has animal detection and object detection. So the demos they gave were dip various animals, as well as like an airplane and things like that. So the autofocus seemed to be drastically improved, even an improvement on the X-T4 and what they have currently. The IBIS is improved. Now it's 7 stops of stabilization that they claim, instead of this is 5.5, and I think the X-T4 is 6 something. So the IBIS is drastically improved. And as far as the video specs, which this model, the X-H2s, is more video centric, it shoots 6K 30p. It shoots 4K 120, 1080 240. It shoots it's capable of shooting internal ProRes at 422. It has more codec options for the H.265 codec, so you have higher bit rates. I think you have 422 H.265, which is very interesting. You can record ProRes RAW and B-RAW, Blackmagic RAW, to external recorders as well. So that is very welcoming, and that meets other competitors in the market, specifically from Panasonic. The record limit goes beyond the 30 minutes that we're used to on the cameras that came before. And one of the most interesting features, and one of the features that got the most extreme reactions from the rumor sites and from the photos, was the optional cooling fan that you can put on the back of the body. So that costs an extra $200, and the people who really would make use of that are the people using it for video, recording long long takes in conditions where the camera might heat up otherwise. So far, all the demos we've seen online, other people that have the pre-production models, no one's mentioned the body heating up without that fan, but clearly Fujifilm is giving you an option to counteract that even if it does happen. I personally like the option to have it and take it off. This to me says that they really care about the wildlife and sports photographer, because if this was strictly 100% a filmmaker, cinematographer centric mirrorless camera, I think they would have made the body thicker, had the fan built in, much like some of the other cameras that we see out on the market now. But they really wanted to keep it a solid hybrid choice for wildlife and sports, or if you're a filmmaker and you want a cinematography camera from Fujifilm. When the X-H1 was released, it was the first camera to introduce internal F-log capabilities. Not long after, they did a software update, they did a firmware update for the X-T2 to get the X-T2 capabilities to shoot F-log internally. And appropriately so, the X-H2s is the first camera to introduce F-log 2, the next generation of their flat profile for video. It has improved dynamic range, so that paired with the higher bitrate codec options they have, as well as the raw options, it's all signs point to a very, very solid, strong image to be able to give you many options to color grade, many post-production options. You have H.264, H.265, ProRes, external ProRes, RAW, external Blackmagic RAW. So you have and within those you have setting options. So you have a plethora of ways to get your image to the card that you choose and into your editing software. So the choices are great. So I'm very, very happy about that, and F-log is a key element to that. I'm happy about the 6K. I'm very happy they didn't even attempt 8K. I feel like that was an extremely smart move to overshoot and not be able to deliver realistically, or to be able to deliver on that. I think doing 6K is completely manageable, and I can't wait to try that out and to see what some of those images look like. I'll get to price in a minute because I want to talk about price just for a little bit, but let's throw price out the window for a second. It checks all the boxes that I would want from a camera that I'm going to use for video. The X-T4 already is this close, so the X-H2s goes above and beyond for me. My wish list are just really solid 4K video at 24 frames, solid high-speed frame rates so I can do slow motion, and solid codecs so I can color grade and do some work on my image in post without it breaking apart completely. And I do want the option for recording RAW externally, even if I don't take advantage of that quite often. Just having that option is nice. So this checks all those boxes for me. Everything I have been looking for in my next budget cinema camera or video camera, this has all those features. So I am very happy with this release in terms of video. So yeah, I can't think of anything specific that it's missing that I would want. It even has the full-size HDMI, which I wouldn't have been too upset if they didn't have it, but it's extremely welcome that they do for many reasons. So yeah, the X-H2s seems like a fantastic filmmaker, video maker, content creator, YouTuber tool. It seems amazing. At $24.99, it's priced where everyone expected it to be. I think some people hoped for it to be lower, but I think we were all kind of crossing our fingers that it wouldn't push or go past that $3,000 landmark. I was hoping it would be under $2,000, because actually been researching options for a camera that can shoot Blackmagic RAW or ProRes RAW. So I've been doing a lot of research on all the options out there for cameras that shoot that great video like that, but also that if I wanted to, that I could take out and maybe take some stills. But at the very least, the core purpose for me was looking for solid video cameras. So I love my X-T4, but I've just been curious to try one of the other brands for a video camera. Sony's on the radar. I don't think the Canon was checking all the marks for me. Nikon was close, but I was really looking at Panasonic, and specifically the Panasonic S5. Now, obviously, you can't compare the Panasonic S5 and the X-H2s completely equally, but some of the key video features that I look for are on the S5, and currently it's on sale for $14.99. So it's just an interesting time. Again, just like when the X-H1 was released, it's just an interesting time for this camera to be released into the market because there is so much competition. So will it do really well at $24.99? I have a feeling it's going to sell much better than the original because of some of the specs that it has and the performance that we're seeing from these early reviews. I think it's going to do quite well, but I just don't think it's a given because of the competition out there. I think if you are in the Fujifilm ecosystem, I think it's a great option if you're a hybrid shooter, sports and wildlife, or a video shooter. But the price, I'm kind of on the fence on the price, I should say. I totally get where their pricing structure is going, and I understand this is the flagship camera, and all their X-Series crop sensor cameras should fall below it. So I'm assuming a few $100s below, around $2,000 will be the X Pro 4, the X-T5, and so on. So things will fall below it. So I understand that business side of things. But just the reality of someone who has a $2,000, $2,500 budget going out to compare all these cameras, this may not obviously win on the spec sheet. What I can say from my experience shooting X-T4, X-H1, and X-T2, and so on, is that even on these codecs, like on the X-H1 that just has H.264, 100 megabits or 200 megabits a second, the image is fantastic. And I really think that that's where Fuji is, just like with stills, the image quality of the video is really where they're going to start blowing people away. That's where they're going to win people over, I should say. I'm going to wait for more reviews to come out of the X-H2s to talk more specifically about the performance of the video and the quality. That's just kind of my early take on it. The other things that were announced that we know are shipping are there was two lenses announced, one for wildlife and sports, the 150 to 600, and then the 18mm to 150, the video-centric lens. It's very interesting. I got to look into it a little bit more, but those are two lenses that are announced with, I think, with prices and release dates. Let's talk about some of the stuff that was like negative or that left many with questions about what's next for Fujifilm and what's next for this lineup. Well, we already talked about the no dials aspect of the X-H2s, which, a lot of us get kind of bummed out seeing that there's not the dials that we're used to, because that's one of the big reasons we started shooting with Fujifilm. If they came out 10 years ago looking like every other camera, I think many of us may not have given them much of a chance, whether they deserve that or not. That's just the reality. Like, we liked the tactile feel. But I understand why this specific model doesn't have the dials. I totally get it. It's marketed to be a truly professional sports, wildlife, and hybrid video camera. And for those markets, the dials aren't needed. Even on my X-T4, when I'm shooting video, when I'm using it as a filmmaker's camera, I turn it to the silent movie mode, which disables the physical dials, and I'm doing everything with the command dials. And that works great. That works great for me for video. For photography, I love the actual dials, as you know. So does the no dials being on the X-H2s, is that a bad sign? No, I don't think so. I just think it's this model. That's what makes sense for the X-H2s. Will the X-H2, the normal one, the one with the 40 megapixel sensor, will that have dials? Actually, I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet, whether it will or not. Part of me thinks the bodies will be identical, but it's in theory they could make the second body slightly different with dials. We'll have to see, but as of right now, obviously my money is on the fact that the X-H2 won't have dials either. So is that a bad sign for the future of the X-series cameras? I don't think so at all. Like I said, I think those are just for certain cameras. It's not going to have it. Like the S10 has its own style. The X-H2 cameras will have its own style. The other thing that kind of made me scratch my head is that the 150 to 600 millimeter lens also did not have an aperture ring on it. I get why the other lens didn't have it, because it is totally video centric and it has that special dial for the zoom. But I was a little taken back that that huge lens didn't have an aperture ring. But then any little panic that I had because it didn't have an aperture ring was soothed, because they did announce 3 other lenses as a part of the lens roadmap that they've had for a while. And one of those lenses is the second version of the 56 millimeter 1.2, which is interesting because technically they already had 2 versions of that with the the normal one and the APD. But either way, 56 millimeter 1.2 Mark II is on the roadmap. Also on the roadmap are 2 new compact prime lenses, a 30 millimeter macro and an 8 millimeter. So the announcement of these 3 lenses really just soothed any worry I had about Fujifilm maintaining their love for the traditional still photography and the traditional dials and whatnot. All 3 of those lenses will have aperture rings, and all 3 obviously are going to be solid hybrid lenses, but they all will have aperture rings and will be all great for photography. And they all seem to be more geared for photography in terms of a macro lens, and the 8 millimeter clearly is geared towards landscape photographers. The 8 millimeter was the biggest surprise for me, to be honest, because it is so wide. So that equals out to a 12 millimeter equivalent focal length on full frame. And if it's a compact prime, then that means it's probably going to be below 600, maybe even below 450, which would be amazing to get that wide of a lens from Fujifilm. Yeah, that's going to be really cool. So those lenses were great signs in my mind. They did say that the next event will be in September, which is when they will officially announce the standard, the normal X-H2, if you will, the one with the 40 megapixel sensor. It's kind of a bummer we have to wait until September to hear about that, but I have a feeling with the supply chain issues and everything going on in the world that this just is, that dictated this reality of having this first event so late in the year and having the second event even later. Normally, I think they would have, like I said, like a February and a July. Now we're looking at a May and September. But it is what it is. I think the September event will make the still photographers, especially street photographers and portraiture photographers, more happy than this event will. I think the September event will be, we will get 2 cameras. I'm guessing the X-H2, as we already know that one. But I'm guessing the other one will be the X Pro 4. And that may be all we get in September. Who knows? Hopefully we'll get more, but that may be all we get. The other thing if we do get another camera, the other one I think we might get, it would be the predecessor to, actually the successor, I should say, not predecessor, the successor to the X100V. The main reason why we wouldn't get that is that those are still so hard to find already. So that camera is still selling like it's brand new. So that may be a sign we may not get that in September. But I think at the very least, the X Pro 4 along with the X-H2. And now this X-H1 is the older X-H model now, but I love it still, as you know. And it's unique because now it has the old school the old school focusing dial. It has the aperture and shutter dials. It has the tilting screen and not the flip out screen. The body's slightly bigger. and so on. So now we have a classic here. In terms of the X-H2s and the details, I guess my little rambling video doesn't give you the whole picture. Watch Pal to Text video. I'll link to that in the description below. He didn't get a camera, but he did a great job, much better job than I did, breaking down all the details and the numbers and kind of what some of that means. So watch his video. Watch Bigheadtaco's video for the unboxing, and he has some cool details in there too, but the unboxing is great because he has other cameras to compare it in terms of size. He has the X-H1, X-T4, and X-Pro 3 out, so you can kind of see the size difference. It gives you a good idea of what the X-H2s looks like. There's a ton of other reviews out there. There are a lot of people that did get the camera, so just search that. You'll find a ton. But keep in mind, no real reviews will be able to be done until final production models are shipped. I think the reviews tonight will give us a good indication of what's good and bad. In July, we'll know more about how well the camera performs once many people get the camera in hand, and we kind of get a collective of their performance and see more image and video samples from it. But so far, all signs point to they knocked it out of the park on the spec sheet. Whether the price is perfect or not, the market will dictate that. We will see. As Fujifilm has proven in the past, they're willing to adjust their price if need be. Just hopefully for their sake, they don't have to drop it all the way to 1,000. For our sake, I don't think any of us would complain if that were to happen, but that's not going to happen, I don't think. So anyways, yeah, the X-H2s and the X-Summit were today, and so far everything looks pretty cool. What do you guys think about it? Is there anything that they did not announce on the spec sheet that you wish that the X-H2 would have had? Is there anything that surprised you? And as far as outside the X-H2 world, what other things are you hoping that they announced in September, stuff that you kind of wish they would have announced today? Leave some stuff in the comments and we'll use it for discussion for the next few videos. So that's it for now, guys. Thank you as always, and I'll talk to you soon.